Welcome to the third episode of Project Bonapartist, a multi-episode, unrealistic scenario where Napoleon manages to win the Napoleonic Wars. Last episode, we discussed the geopolitical situation of the world after this Napoleonic victory, and I even hinted that France was gonna break out into a full-scale civil war. Why? Well, go check out the previous episode on the top right here if you want to get the full context. In this episode, I will actually discuss the civil war and how the world reacts to it. Before we get into the episode, I'm sorry for not uploading in a long while. That's because I was way too busy with other stuff in my life, as well as procrastinating on my uploads. I'll also start using this AI voice for a while in order to produce these videos more consistently, and because I got my phone and iPad taken away, which are the devices I use to make these videos. Starting on July 8th, I'll upload a video every single week, and upload a Project Bonapartist episode at the first of every month starting on August 1st, at least until school starts for me again on September 3rd. So with that mumbo-jumbo out of the way, let's start the episode. In France, things are heating up between the French liberals who support Louis Napoleon as emperor, and French conservatives who support Joseph Bonaparte as emperor. This has gotten so big that even the average Joes are divided on this issue. But so far, it looks like Joseph Bonaparte is the favorite here. That's because he's 26 years older than his nephew, being 50 once Napoleon II died and Louis Napoleon being only 24 once that happened. Another reason is because he's currently ruling a nation right now, and that means that Joseph has more experience at being a monarch than Louis. This also means that many independent nations in Europe will give more diplomatic support to Joseph than Louis. Things seem bleak for Louis Napoleon, at least until the long-anticipated French Civil War has finally ignited. Now, we gotta get something out of the way. The previously mentioned United Napoleonic Empire of Europe is less of a unified state, and more of a loose alliance between France and their puppets. Kinda like NATO if it was established in the early to mid-1800s. This means that independent nations in Europe who aren't ruled by a Bonaparte like Scotland, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Prussia, the Ottoman state, and Egypt aren't forced to ally with Napoleonic France and can even go to war against France if they really wanted to. Now, before we get into the actual civil war, we need to look at the international reactions of this conflict. Due to the ongoing events right now, almost all powers of the world would take advantage of a weakened France. For example, Greece, Turkey, and Bulgaria would convene in Sofia to cook up a plan to partition the French Bosporus. Greece would gain more of western Anatolia, Bulgaria would gain eastern Thrace, Turkey would gain the lands east of Constantinople, and Constantinople itself would be a condominium between the three. In Central Europe, Denmark-Norway would invade Holstein and Sweden would invade Mecklenburg. In the east, the Russian Republicans would try to regain their lost lands, including Belarus, who at this moment would be officially in the French sphere. The Muscovites would be developed enough to start a mass reconquering spree across Eurasia. In North Africa, Egypt invades Tripoli, Tunis, and Algiers, with many journalists of this time period claiming that Egypt wants to become a successor state to both the Umayyad Caliphate and the Roman Empire. Wink wink. In the Americas, American troops have now entered many French Caribbean and South American colonies in plans to annex them. This would further polarize the already polarized state because the Whigs, whose political power was centered in the North and were, sorta, the successor to the Federalists, were opposed to U.S. imperialism because they thought that the occupied territories would vote Democrat rather than Whig. The American campaign would be very successful in the Caribbean, but the Guianas, not so much, because the Guiana region was mostly covered in large forests, which would make it hard for the soldiers to navigate the lands. Another reason is because many native tribes who survived European colonization were sabotaging the American war effort. This is like America's Vietnam before the Vietnam War was a thing. And to add fuel to the fire, Brazil has started deploying boots into the region in hopes of controlling the land. While all of this was going on, the Spanish government in exile would feel threatened by American and Brazilian expansionism and would secretly try to align themselves with the native rebels in Guyana in order to contain the continental giants, giving the Guyana natives economic and military aid in the process. Now, going back to Europe, Hungary would invade French Illyria in order to gain a bigger coastline and, more importantly, regain their 1190 lands. As you can see, we have a globe that's taking advantage of the French world order and conquering lands France held that they really wanted. But if you're enjoying my content so far, consider subscribing. Here's some videos that I'll be releasing in the near future. So if you want to see them, hit that subscribe button. I'm also open to any suggestions, so if you have some, leave them in the comments after this video is over. Anyways, back to the episode. Meanwhile, back in France, Paris is looking like Stalingrad during World War II, with the French liberals and conservatives constantly clashing with each other over the city. The Battle of Paris would be the longest, bloodiest, and most important battle throughout the French Civil War. Other major battles in the French Civil War would include Versailles and Reims, cities which had strong historical ties to the Bourbons. Looking at Eastern Europe, Russian forces have entered Belarus, with the Russian troops fighting the disorganized French ones. Since the Frenchmen in Belarus don't know which side to take in the ongoing civil war, they would suffer from a lot of infighting in the French military, causing Russia to regain Belarus. Russia would also invade Ukraine, but unlike in 2025, this would be successful, with Kiev would be captured in just under a few weeks. Russia would only annex lands east of the Dnieper in order to not piss off the global powers. Going back to the political, military, and economic capital of the world, Paris, conservative forces would make major gains across the city, with the liberals slowly losing ground. This would make nations such as Egypt and Sweden gradually give more and more aid to conservative forces in France. I'd expect this civil war to last for about 1 to 2 years at most, ending with a conservative victory. In the peace terms, starting in the Americas, Caribbean territories previously held by France are now under the control of the Americans, with de facto control over Guiana currently disputed between the US, Brazil, and the remaining natives. In North Africa, Egypt would quickly seize Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli, as well as directly annexing the east of the Middle East. The partition of the French Bosporus would be officially recognized by all powers, with French Illyria coming under the hand of the Hungarians. And finally, the meat of the peace deal, France would come under the emperorship of Joseph, being crowned Joseph I of France. This means that Joseph Bonaparte is now the Emperor of France, King of Iberia, King of England, King of Italy, and Protector of the Rhine, making him the most powerful man in the world, even more powerful than his younger brother, Napoleon. This would force Louis into exile in Morocco, where a few months later would execute a coup, overthrowing Abd al-Rahman of Morocco and replacing him with Louis himself, making him King Louis I of the Napoleonic Kingdom of Morocco, causing tensions between France and Morocco. But 3 questions would arise. Number 1, would America conquer Guiana? Number 2, will Russia be able to regain their pre-Napoleonic lands? And most importantly of all, number 3, will France be able to regain their prestige across the planet? Or will they be overshadowed by other powers like the US or Russia? Find out next time on the 4th episode of Project Bonapartist. Make sure you guys subscribe to this channel as well as my first channel in the description and comments below. Also check out my TikTok and Twitter, which will also be in the comments and description.
This has been Awesome History, and adios, amigos!